Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be talking about the next sequence in our data vault application, which will just be accessing entry data. So here we'll just start by going straight into the inputs. So for the input, we're going to input the name of the entry and then the category name. So the inputs here are very similar to those of the create entry data, except we're not inputting data just because we want to read the data. This is kind of like get data versus set data, where in set data you have to pass in the actual new data, but in get data it just returns it. So we'll start pretty much the same. It's gonna be the same procedure for the most part. We're gonna find the category ID. We're just gonna go into the map. So cat ID is equal to category ID map rather, and pass in the category. And if cat ID is equal to 0, then we're going to return null because this category does not exist, so there's no way that any entry can have it. Next is going to be to find the entry ID. So we'll start by doing the same thing. ID is equal to the name ID map, passing in the name of the entry. And if ID is equal to 0, then return null because there is no category, or there's no entry by that name. And then next we're just going to be reading through all the data corresponding to that entry. So read entry data. Here we're going to start by initializing our cursor once again. So current block is equal to ID IDX map, passing in the ID that we read or that we got. And then we're also going to have the previous block, which is equal to 0, because once again we have to increment the data initialization vector. So we're going to have another while true loop here. So we'll increment data IV by current block minus previous block. We're going to read our data, so the block is equal to, it's going to be the same thing that we have over here in create data, because here in create data, we're trying to find the end of an entry by looking for a 0 category, but here we're trying to find the matching category. So it's going to be this pretty much the same, and it's going to be the exact same inputs. So the block is equal to AES decrypt 256, passing in the key is equal to data key. The text is equal to the block of data.dv at index current block. And then the IV is equal to data IV. And then we're going to do for I in the range 0 to 12. So over here we're going to say if the current category is equal to 0, then we have not read a category yet. So current category is equal to block at I. And then if the current category is equal to 0 once again, then we're going to return null. Because if the character at I is 0, then we have no more categories to read, so there's no more entries. Otherwise, we're going to read characters until we get a 0 or the end. So this is just starting from the category character. So we're going to read characters, and if the current category is equal to the cat ID, so our target, then we want to add the characters to the return string. So ret characters plus equals the characters. And the reason why I'm doing plus equals is because the data can continue into another block. And otherwise, we're just going to continue. And then now we're going to say, after this block, we're going to say previous block now is equal to current block. And then current block is equal to the value at the input of 12 to 16 and base 256. So we're trying to find the next block. And if current block is equal to 0, then break. So what will happen is when we iterate to the next block, if we have characters that still need to be read, this current category will not evaluate to 0 at first, so we're going to read characters until we find either a 0 or the end, but the current category will still be the category ID. So we're going to add that set of characters that we read in the next block to the return string. So once we're done with the block loop, then we are going to say if return characters, then return characters. Otherwise, just return null, because there was something else that did not happen. And then I should also say here is that if we need to make a distinction here between reading characters until the 0 or the end. So if the current category is the target, then we want to add them to the string here, to the return string. But if the block at I is equal to 0, then we need to break because we found all the characters. So I'm going to do a break out of this loop, but then we also want to break out of the second loop. So I'm just going to do a double break right here. This is not proper code, but the thing is, we're just going to be breaking out of all the loops. So we're going to go to the return here, the return statement here. So what I guess we can just say is, we'll just have a Boolean up here saying completed is equal to false, and if the block at I is equal to 0, then completed is equal to true, and then outside of that, the index loop, then we're going to say if completed, then break. So completed will either happen if the current block is 0, or if the next block is 0. So there's no more data to read, or if we read a 0, indicating the end of the current entry data. And that is that. So that's accessing it. I'll just go over it one more time. So we find the category ID, find the entry ID, validate those, and then we're going to iterate through each block until we find the category ID, the matching category ID, and then we're going to read that entry that may span several. It may span several blocks, but that's okay because we're just going to be incrementing characters into a return string that we will return at the end. So yeah, that's accessing entry data. And in the next one, I think we're going to be doing modification of data, and then we'll start writing some code. All right, I hope you guys learned something, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good one.